All right. What do you say, Kat? Shall we start?
Let's get going.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us in this webinar in our Digital Skills Week that we have organized here in the Netherlands. But we're sharing this webinar more broadly than just the Netherlands. And that's why I'm very proud to have my colleague from the other side of the world joining us for this conference, this webinar, sorry, Kat. Very welcome, very warm welcome. We're going to talk about the employee experience and how Microsoft tooling can help there, because what is tooling if you cannot bring any additional experience to your employee, right? So Kat is our specialist in that, and I'm very much looking forward to this webinar. If you have any questions, feel free to use the chat. I would like to ask you to keep yourself muted during the webinar. We can definitely have room for questions at the end of the webinar. So it's perfectly fine to open up the microphone then and ask your questions. But if you have any questions in between, feel free to post them in the chat. I will be monitoring the chat. My role is just the moderator today. Kat will do most of the talking. So I will have a look out on the chat and answer where possible. And otherwise, we will collect questions until after the webinar. Kat, take it away, please.
Thank you. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. I'm coming to you from Brisbane, Australia. But for those of you who are trying to guess my accent, I'm actually Danish. So people always ask me what my accent is. I am from Denmark. I've lived in Australia for 5 years now, and very proud to be a part of the Rapid Circle team here. So as it says on the screen, I am the principal consultant for what we call the Adopt and Embrace team here in Australia. I like to explain us just as the people in a tech company. So everything we do in our team and everything I talk about is always going to start with the people. And you're going to see that theme coming through as I go through my presentation today. So very happy to be here. And again, I look forward to your questions at the end of this session. Also happy to do a bit of demoing and things like that if we have any spare time. So yeah, write down your questions in the chat and I will get to all of them. But before we kick off, I just want to share with you one of my absolute favorite quotes. So the quote goes, "Organizations don't make things happen, people do." And I know it seems very straightforward, but I think we sometimes tend to forget that organizations is not actually a thing. It is organizations are made up of people who every day show up to work and do their jobs, and that's what make organizations happen, and that's how things happen. So favorite quote, love to use it all the time, and I think it really sets the scene for what we want to talk about today. Because we're talking about people, we are talking about that we want our people to have a great employee experience, right? But first of all, there are some challenges with that at the moment. We're kind of in a different space than we were just 5-6 years ago. We're in a space today where we have what we call the hybrid paradox. So we think pre-pandemic, a lot of us were used to going into the office every single day. We're just used to that was just the way it was. If you were sick, you just didn't join a call, or you were on a little tab there on the table in the conference room, you could barely hear anything, right? That was beforehand. Then we went into the pandemic and we all worked from home. So suddenly everything was remote and all of us were away, and that became the new norm. And now we're in this weird paradox where a lot of us really want to keep this flexibility of being able to work from home and have being able to balance our life that way, but we also want to have more in-person collaboration because we miss each other. We miss that water cooler conversation. We miss that collaboration with each other. So that's a real paradox, because then we actually have to prepare for hybrid work, which is a whole thing in itself, right? And that's where technology becomes really important as well. The other thing is what we call the worth it equation. So during the pandemic, I think a lot of us had a bit of an eye-opener about what's important in our lives, and people are prioritizing their health and well-being higher than they were before. And because they're doing this, they're also having high expectations of their employers. So they're expecting that their employers also care about their health and well-being, and that they're taking clear steps to support them in that. The last thing is that a lot of us, 2 in 3 people, quite a lot, say they struggle every day to have both the time and the energy to do their jobs. And when you look into the reasons why, is because a lot of people feel really overwhelmed by all the technology that we have. And with that, I mean all the meetings that we're in, all the emails that we have to go through, all the Teams chats that come in, and we are just getting overwhelmed from everywhere. There's sprawl, and we can't get through everything we feel like we need to get to. And we're not having enough focus time because we're constantly getting, little pings here and there. We're not having that time to actually focus and get through our work. We call this digital debt as well, because it's all all about, there's all these digital things interrupting you all the time, which really takes a toll on our well-being. So all these things, along with a lot of other things, can really affect the employee experience, but also, again, what your employees are expecting of you as employers. The good thing is that if you do focus on your employee experience and you take steps to really raise it up, there's some key benefits that you can really attain from it. So first is retention. I think that stat up there with 12 times less likely to leave a company if you're highly engaged, I think is a very cool number. I think it makes sense, right? If you're really happy where you are, you want to stay. But if we look at then into the cost of attrition, the cost of not having people stay, that becomes even more important. And when people are engaged and they're happy, they're more likely to be innovative and more likely to think strategically. And that then helps us raise our profitability and, as it says, our innovation. And at the end of the day, employee experience equals customer experience. We've all been on calls with someone on the other end who obviously doesn't like their job very much and how that affects us. Just an example. We also, some of us probably been interacting with someone you can just tell really love their job. And that just changes our experience as a customer as well. And for a lot of us, our customers are the bread and butter of what we do. So this is also just an important thing to keep in mind. So back to employee experience. I think in the day that we live now, I think a lot of us can kind of realize that technology will play some role in uplifting the employee experience. But it's actually so high that, for a lot of people, they say it's actually ranked number 3 for what could reduce workplace stress. So it's really will have an impact on the employee experience. It's a really key thing that we need to focus on. But what we sometimes do is that when we say, okay, we want to improve the employee experience, I've seen this new cool technology, I've seen this new cool tool. I'm going to take it, I'm going to put it into this context, into this work process, and that's going to be great. And then I'm going to go train people and communicate to them. It's going to be great. They're going to get it, and it's just going to improve everything. But what sometimes happens is that we're actually putting in a technology that doesn't actually solve the problem that was there. So what we propose in the way that we work at Rapid Circle is we actually say we turn it around. So we say, let's start with the people. Let's start with asking them, what are your challenges? What are your problems? What are the things that's important to you? How can we help? We then say, okay, so what is the context or process that this problem or challenge or opportunity is occurring in? And then we say, what are the different technologies that we can use to help solve this challenge or, make this opportunity happen? And technologies is important because I really believe that it's by combining different types of technology is that where you really get the benefit. I'm going to show you some examples of that today. So the way we do it, more specifically, when we're talking very much about employee experience, is that the first thing we do is we go to customers and say, okay, let's look across your employee lifecycle. So those of you who have worked in HR or in other people-related positions might know this. So this is the Gallup employee lifecycle. There are other life cycles out there that look very similar. This is the one we like. And it goes through from attract to depart. So it's basically from the moment a employee even gets in contact with your organization. So they start thinking about wanting to come in to the place that you work. Goes through hiring, goes through onboarding. And that onboarding is really when they actually start in the organization. The engage, perform, and develop, and a little bit of a circle. See it there, those colors on purpose because they all fit together. So engaging is all about leadership, communication, well-being, everything that kind of makes you feel engaged and being a part of the organization. Performance is getting our job done. So it's modern ways of working. It's how we're going to be more productive. It's how we're going to be more innovative together. How are we going to work better together? And develop is how are we developing professionally and personally as part of this organization. And then departing. We often forget that it's important people have a good offboarding experience as well as they have a good onboarding experience. So it is important to think about that step at the end there as well. So what we do, I'll just go back one, is that we actually ask people, what are your challenges across this? So we work with customers, we fill this in, we say, find all the different things. Then we go through a process and say, okay, we actually can identify that your key challenges are in these areas. We then say, okay, well, we can help you in different ways with this. So let's say the challenge has come back that there's just too many communication channels. I'm really overwhelmed by it. I don't know where to go for different, I don't know how to go to communicate with people in my organization. There's a couple different things we can do with that. We can both look under engage and we can think about, okay, what is that engage in communication? How do we set up a communication strategy in a way that people can engage with their organization that's really purposeful and really, engaging? But you can also look from it from a modern ways of working. So if we think about communication from a work perspective, if I'm trying to contact Martin on Teams, but he only wants to see emails, well, we're going to be in trouble because we're going to not reach each other. So every challenge you can look at in different ways and try to help to solve it. But I'd mentioned just the technology there, but it's first about finding out what is the challenge and what are sort of the things that we can work with to solve it. What is the context? And then we say, this looks a bit overwhelming, and I promise I'll go through it, is what are the technologies? So you'll see in every single one of these different buckets, there are multiple technologies. And for some of you, these icons might be new. So I'm actually going to take you through them. The one icon you may know is M365. So that's the Teams and everything that sits within that SharePoint, Outlook, everything that sits within that bucket. But I've also added on all the Viva icons because that is really the key thing that Microsoft have put into the market to help improve the employee experience. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time going through the Viva platform because one of the questions I get the most is what is Viva? And a lot of people have an idea that Viva is just that little thing you get in Teams or you get in your email telling you to do things a little bit different. So it'll say, do you want to send this email later? Or do you want to, remember to think about this? That is a very, very tiny piece of Viva. Viva is actually a lot bigger than that. So Viva is a full employee experience platform that currently has 9 modules in it. So this has been growing over the last few years with more modules kind of coming out. So Amplify, for example, just came out very recently, as well as Glint and some of the others. So first to know about Viva is that there are some parts of Viva that you already have access to as part of your E3 or E5 license. So that is connections, engage, parts of insights, and parts of learning. Also, actually, parts of engage as well. So they are some of the things you can already see. But then there is actually all these other products as well that sit in a premium licensing. And you can go online Microsoft's website to see how they're broken down because they all do very different things. So I'm just going to at a very high level go through each so that you guys feel like you can walk away from this session, at least a little bit answer the question, what is Viva? So the first one at the top left is Viva Connections. So this is our modern intranet. Again, this is something you have access to already. So what this does is we can actually connect, if your intranet is on SharePoint Online, we can actually connect your intranet into Teams. So it'll sit at the very top of your Teams, and you can actually change the logo. So for example, ours is just our Rapid Circle logo and it says RC Intranet. And when I click in there, I go off to our intranet, and it's really easy because it's in the flow of work. And generally, that's what I think is amazing about Viva is it all sits within Teams. So you don't have to context switch, you don't have to go off to somewhere else, it all sits right there. The other cool thing about connections is you can do dashboard cards, which are these adaptive cards that make it really easy to connect in different systems and do all kinds of different things. So I could talk for hours about just that. If it's something you're interested in, I'd recommend you have a look. There's a bunch of good resources online to help you get on that journey. There's Viva Connection Premium where you can actually have multiple home sites, but that's a different story. Viva Engage is Yammer. So Yammer rebranded into Viva Engage and attached into Teams. Viva Engage has 2 levels. So you have the Viva Engage that you would have as where you had Yammer. There's some new functionality like storylines and things like that that kind of improve the experience. But then there's also some really cool functionality in the premium version of that, including Leadership Corner, Answers in Viva, and other things like that. What's then come on top of that very recently is Viva Amplify, which is a bit of an internal communication team's dream. So what that does, it's basically a tool where I can draft, get reviewed, distribute, and get analytics for all my communications that I send out across Teams, SharePoint, Viva Engage, and Outlook. So if you think about it as a communication person trying to write out, I have to write 4 different types of posts. I have to get them sent off all directions, getting them approved. And I have to try to figure out how do I get the analytics on it. This tool actually combines it all. So very cool. Definitely worth looking into for your internal communications teams. So those are all the what we call the CNC ones, so communication and connections. So then the next level down, we have Viva Insights. So again, you would have personal insights already. So you actually already have an app in Teams where you can see some of your own well-being and productivity trends. And if you haven't checked that out, I'd recommend you do. Maybe set up some focus time, do some different things like that. But then there are two levels above, well, there's a level above that that gives you a bunch of different functionality. So with level above, you can actually, as a team leader, if you have 9 or more people in your team, you can actually see the productivity and well-being insights for your team. And no, it's not Big Brother because it is trends. It's not showing that this person is doing this and this person is doing this. It's just showing general trends that you as a manager can see. There's an organizational level about that as well. And then there's really cool Power BI reports that I'll show you some examples of later. Glint is an employee survey tool at an organizational level that also has AI built into it. So it can do cool things like summarizing comments, and it has action plans and then all kinds of things. Where then Viva Pulse is more at the lower level. If I, as a project manager or a leader, wants to just ask specific questions of my team or the people that I'm working with. So they all fit together in a bit of an employee listening group, and they work together in really good ways. At the bottom, we have Viva Learning, which again, you have access to part of that. And in the advanced version, you can then connect in your LMSs, you can connect in things like LinkedIn Learning and other learning content providers. So it all sits within Teams in the same way. So again, part of it you can already find, and then there's a level up from that. Topics is a knowledge management tool that helps you really crowdsource knowledge and make sure that you see who the subject matter experts are in your organization and collect all that together and really work together to improve your knowledge sharing. And lucky last is Viva Goals, which is built on the OKR methodology, which stands for objectives, key results, and then projects is underneath that, or initiatives. So it's basically a strategic way of translating your strategy into achievable objectives that you can actually achieve and a way to track that. So that was quite a lot of information on it. Again, if you want to know more about what the different levels are, there's plenty of information online. I just wanted to leave you with what is that thing called Viva. So I hope that helped. Cool. So now what I want to do is I want to show you a couple of examples of what's in here and what we've actually done with clients. And I'll also show you a little bit about, I guess, what the possibilities are. One thing I will just mention before I do that is just so that you know, is that, Copilot is the hot topic at the moment in the same way that it's going to be in M365 Suite. It's actually also going to be in quite a few of the Viva products as well. So again, plenty of cool videos online to see what that's going to look like, but just good to know if it's something you're looking into. So these are the 3 employee experience uplifts that I am going to talk you through. I'm going to talk you a little through, you can see what our process is, people, context, technology, and how that kind of looks in real life. So the first one I'm going to talk about is understanding and taking action to improve employee well-being, enabling collaboration between frontline and office workers, and then talk a little bit about governance. It's something we don't often talk about when we're also talking about employee experience, but I'll show you why I think that's really important. So the first one, understanding and taking action to improve employee well-being. So I don't know about your organizations, but I've worked with a lot of organizations who on a yearly basis or 6-monthly basis get these survey results back. So they got these survey results back saying people are happy with this and not happy with this, or they think this or they think that, which is awesome. And it's such a good way to work with, figure out what's going on and get some key data that leaders can really use to then make informed decisions. But it is just perception data. So, and also with how many people are replying to the surveys and all these different things that we have with surveys. So that's perception data. And that's where, if I just go back, things like Glint and Pulse can really help within this suite, or Forms, or other things like that. But it's a really good tool, and I do highly recommend every organization should have a survey for their employees so people feel listened to. But sometimes you get these results back and you're like, okay, so people aren't happy with, or they feel like they're working too much. What am I going to do now? How am I actually going to take an action on this? How do I get more information to help with that? And that's where those Power BI reports from Viva Insights that I mentioned come into handy. So this is an example of a report that we did for a customer. And what we've done is we actually added in their survey results. So their survey results, they didn't use Glint. They had a different survey tool. So we actually took just a screenshot of it and put it in just to show what it can look like. In the future, if you do go down the Glint and Viva Insights path, they're actually going to be reports that do this automatically. But for this one, for example, we can see that on the right-hand side, this was the survey result that we got out. So you can see there's quite a lot of people in here that's yellow and red about that whole, I'm feeling emotionally exhausted, I'm really tired. When I started with this project team, their hypothesis was that this was all due to meetings. Said it's just because we are in too many meetings every day, because these people were leaders. So a lot of them were in meetings every day. And for them, that was really what was emotionally draining them. But when we ran the data, and Viva Insight gathers all data across M365, so it's behavioral data. So it's how much time am I spending on this, how much time am I doing different things. So it is, of course, limited in the way that you have to be using the M365 tools to get the data. But what was really interesting was that we assumed it was meetings, but if you look at the data here, the average was actually only 5.7. I don't know about you, but 5.7 hours of meetings a week doesn't sound too bad to me, and it didn't to the project team either. So I actually had to go back and be like, okay, so that's interesting. What is it that actually is then causing people to feel emotionally exhausted? And I had to dive in a little bit deeper. So we then took this report, and you can dive down to different levels and kind of get into who are the different people, what are the different challenges that are going on. But just again, a way of saying, okay, we can't just always assume if you don't have all the information. Another example is that this survey result said that people have the flexibility they need. And, a lot of people really feel that way. But it's also showing that people are working 1.5 hours outside of hours. So that's calculated based on what your outlook is set to. So if your outlook is set to 8 to 4, if you're working until 5, that's an hour outside of hours. But what it's showing is that that's actually not a problem for a lot of people, because people like that flexibility. They like to be able to work in that way. So again, you can kind of put these information up against each other. And what I always say to clients when we're pulling these reports is that it's just data. It's just data until you give it the context of your organization. Because in our organization, because we work, Martin's in the Netherlands, I'm in Australia, we work some weird hours sometimes because we want to connect with each other. So for us, we could have quite a lot of outside of hours collaboration hours. And that's not a problem for us because that's just how our organization works. Versus if you're in an organization where actually we're trying to stay within an 8 to 5 and people are doing 5 hours outside of hours, that's the problem. So again, these reports are only as good as the context that you set on top of it. And a really key part of using these things is actually having leaders learn how to interpret data and actually make informed decisions based on this data. One of the things you can then do is once you understand all this data, a lot of us in our yearly strategy work have a pillar that talks about employee experience, employee well-being, or something like that. So let's say we get all these results out of Viva Insight and your survey tool, whatever that is. What we can do is we can then translate that into OKRs, and we can put it into Viva Goals, and we can actually track. Okay, so if we are working towards, getting a higher ENPS, and we're going to do that through digital leadership programs, we can actually start tracking how we're doing with it. So if you think about it from an employee listening perspective, what we often hear is that people say, I fill in the survey every year, but I don't feel like anything's done with it. If we put it into Viva Goals and people have visibility of that, they can actually see how the progress is going on and they'll feel like they're actually being listened to. So that's just an example of how, 3 or more tools can actually work together to help improve employee well-being. The next one I want to talk to you about is how do we enable collaboration between frontline and office workers? So we often think that, it's working pretty well. No, it's fine. They can communicate. They all have access to different things. But in reality, there's a lot of challenges. So what we often hear in these situations is there's a lack of a central location for people to communicate and collaborate, because again, people even though they might all have access to it, do people actually use it the same? So again, is Martin using Outlook and I'm using Teams? What's going on here? It can be hard to find the right information. And a lot of people, especially frontline, have just gotten into the habit of just calling people they know. And then that knowledge is really lost from a knowledge sharing perspective. And at the end of the day, a lot of solutions out there are not very mobile friendly. And that's where some of the tools that sit in Viva really come in handy, as well as Teams. So here's an example of what we did with a customer. So what we did is that we used what's called our 10 P's of Teams design. So the original Adopt and Embrace company, who was purchased by Rapid Circle and is now our team now, we actually wrote 2 books on how to use Teams. We're that passionate about it. And one of the big things we wrote about in the first book was about the 10 P's, because Teams is just a tool until you put behaviors around it and guidelines around it, so that we're all working in the same way in the same tool. So there's 10 P's that we go through, and we use that to design really purposeful team sites so that we all know what we're doing, and it's so much easier to collaborate with each other. So we did that. So we had people from both frontline and office together. We did this session. We designed it together, saying, what is the problem we're trying to solve? What is going to be the purpose of this team? Why are you working together? Who are the people going to be? So that's all, okay, well, we're going to have people who are going to be remote on mobiles. Well, that's important for the solution that we're designing. What are our priorities? What are our channels going to look like? What are our principles? So, tagging for action, you liking that you've seen it, making sure you share things in there, all these different things about behavior and other things as well. A great framework to kind of help use Teams in a better way. And then we used 3 different Viva tools on top of that. So we use Viva Learning to add in different learning paths within that team that we had just assigned. So it was one of the plugins that we added in. So in there was around one of the things was around power tools. So we actually uploaded all the videos of the different power tools that people could use, so that when new people onboarded, people could just send them a link to that and they could learn how to use this new tool, amongst other things. What we then also did is that we created topic pages with Viva topics on key topics that are important for these people to know. So one of them was around these different codes that they needed, and it was something that people struggled with every day to find the right information, but also to find out, who do I go to if I then have follow-up questions, and where's the right document, and who's keeping it up to date, and everything like that. And then we took those topic cards and we made them into adaptive topic pages and made them into adaptive cards. And the cool thing about that is, once you've created adaptive cards on your phone, in Teams, it's the first thing that shows up. So imagine someone's out on the front, out in the field, working on different things, has to go in and find those codes. All they have to do is open Teams, and the first thing that shows up is that card that takes them into the codes and all the information, including all the people they can ask questions of. So really cool. So that all was made into an integrated solution. We can see here, I know it's a little bit small, but the one on the left here, let's see if I can just put this one here. This one here is when you first open your mobile, you see these are the 3 cards that we created. We also created some other cards because there, as I said, a lot of cool things you can do. You can see here we then created very purposeful channels, because there's a lot of different things that these people needed to work together on. And then we added in different learnings for them as well. And it all fit into an integrated solution within Teams. So again, Viva is not a separate thing that sits in a separate box. It all fits within Teams, and it's all about just improving the employee experience in different ways. So that was the second example of how you can improve the employee experience with the different tools that we're talking about. And again, if we just go back, this is all about talking about people, right? So we're talking, what's your problem? What is the purpose you're trying to do? Then we talk about before we actually put it into the technology, we actually talked about, okay, well, what are the key things that you want to do? So that's, we're trying to do codes. We want to learn how to do things better. Like, we're putting it into context. And then we find out, well, what technology can we best use for that? And then we build that into a solution. So it goes through the same process again. Cool. So the last one I'll talk you through before we'll jump to some questions is all that governance. So again, not often words we say in the same sentence, governance and employee experience, but we're finding more and more that this is actually the key to improving the employee experience. And if you just look at these numbers that are on the screen, that 1.6 billion documents are added a day to M365, and how much unstructured content that is, and how much there's going to be by 2025. What that causes is it causes sprawl. It causes that we don't know what to use when. We don't know where to find things. We don't know what's going on, because there's just too much that's been put into there. And one of the things that I'm kind of seeing at the moment with a lot of my clients is that, during the pandemic, or just before or just after, we rolled out Teams, right? We put it out there with the best intentions of saying everyone needs to have a tool to work with, and it was the right thing to do at the right time. The problem is we didn't always put the right governance around it, and that means, can all things like the bumper lanes you put up when you're bowling, making sure that people are working within the right way. So people are just going all kinds of different things. And if you are like any of the organizations that I work with, you will have 1 million teams, some of them doing the same thing, confusion about where to go for different things, confusion on what to do, or whichever the way. But there's a lot of sprawl going around. There's a lot of, not lack of control of what we're doing. So, and what this causes is it causes people to just feel really overwhelmed. And then when people feel really overwhelmed, they just, they're disengaged and they're not innovative. And we come back to that stat we saw at the beginning that 2 out of 3 people feel like this. So this is a really, really key thing that we need to think about when we're thinking about our employee experience. Even though, for a people person, it's not the first thing I thought about, but it is something that I'm recommending to every client I have at the moment who are coming and having this challenge. So the way that we help with this challenge is that we first go again to the person. What is the person? What are the different things that we are trying to do? What are the different ways that we work? What are the different, challenges and problems, opportunities that we have? What we then do is we use tools like Orchestrate or AvePoint because they have a really cool functionality that they can actually manage the whole life cycle of both Teams, SharePoint, and Orchestrate can also do Viva Engage. So you can actually it's a provisioning tool. So you can create we use the Rapid Circles 10 Ps that I talked about before. And we help design really purposeful templates. So an example of that could be a project template. So a project template, we've then worked with key people in the business, going back to what are people trying to do. We use the 10 Ps to decide, okay, so when you are doing a project, most organizations, projects run relatively similar, or at least we try to make them run a little bit similar. So we can actually create a structure that can work for a lot of different scenarios. We then design that using the 10 Ps. We then use Orchestrate to set that up. And what that looks at the end is that for the end user, they go in through Teams and they select the workspace that they want. So when they select the workspace that they want, they actually can come in here and it's already set up in more of a structured way. And it also stops people from having, and as you go through, you have to give it a name. You can even put in naming conventions. You have to think about guest access. You have to think about all kinds of different things that helps you manage it, so that you get a little bit more of those, bumper lanes up around your bowling alley and help structure things. On the other hand of that, you can also manage at the end of it, see what teams aren't being used. You can help it kind of then archiving things and working through decommissioning teams so that, again, that sprawl is minimized. And again, you can do the same for SharePoint and Viva Engage. It is important just to note on this one is that we're doing a lot of what I kind of consider as M365 adoption 2.0, where we're kind of coming back around and we're saying, okay, one thing is great to put in governance, but we might also just have to work a little bit with people to figure out, well, teaching them how to use the tools in a better way. Now that we all kind of are familiar with it, let's talk about proper structures. Let's teach people things like the 10 Ps. Let's teach people what is the difference between SharePoint and Teams and when do we use what? So put some guidelines in also at a behavioral level is going to be really important. So those were 3 examples of how you can improve the employee experience. This is something I could talk about for days. So I tried to keep it within 35, 40 minutes. And I will just leave you before we go to questions with this quote. So technology is only valuable when it supports the employee experience and help people work more effectively. And I think that kind of sums up everything we've just talked about. So with that, I'm going to jump over to questions. I don't know, Martin, if we have any in the chat or if anyone wants to come off mute.
Thanks so much, Kat. Great story. Yes, we have one in the chat, actually. Shefali asks, hi, Kat, I have had experience where end users may not know, for example, what Delph is and how it can be used, which might be something we may not envision while drafting our strategies leading to failure of initiatives for good employee experience. What is your recommendation over these challenges, especially for large organizations where there's a diverse audience?
Well, I think part of it is learning about who the different type of people in your organization is. As a diverse audience, it is important to understand who the different people in your organization are. So not everyone is going to have the same employee experience. Then what we want to do is we do want to do a current state assessment. So we want to understand if your challenge is we don't really know what people know about. You could quite simply ask people or send out a survey, or you could also look at some of your adoption scores and see what are people using, what are they not using. I've worked with organizations where no one used forms because they didn't know it was a thing. So that was a key thing for us to then add into our adoption strategy. So a really important part is start with that current state assessment of your people, of your technology, of your environment. What does it look like? Is it also, my technical colleagues would be happy for me to say this, is it safe? Do you have the right information protection, the right information retention, all these different things in place so that your people and your information is protected? And you use that current state assessment to then say, okay, so then what is the future state we want to get to? So we say, in the ideal world, this is how we want to work, or this is where we want to get to. And then we do a gap assessment and we say, okay, so if this is where we are and this is where we want to get to, that's our adoption and our implementation plan. So I think that the understanding the current state is really key to that, I would say.
Thanks. Feel free to open also your microphone if you have a question. We're not with that many, so it's totally fine to ask your question out loud or put it in the chats.
Also happy to demo any of the Viva products if anyone wants to see any of them. Hi.
Can I ask you a question? Thank you for the presentation. Very, very clear. And I want to ask a question about archiving and the governance of that part. So the journey of your documents. Do you have also a webinar about that maybe in the future?
Sorry, you have what in the future? I didn't get that last part.
Maybe a webinar. I think it's a topic on its own.
Webinar.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. Yeah, definitely. So this part, I actually normally, I've done this presentation at a digital workplace conference before. And what I actually do is I stand on stage with my way more technical colleague who knows everything about information management and information retention and purview and all those other things. So I agree. It's a full topic by itself and really something, I think would be good to talk more about. But also I know also there's people in the Netherlands who can talk more a lot about that.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a topic on itself. I think Microsoft is really moving into that space as well, and that they're much better at it than let's say a couple of years ago. And there's a big difference, I think, between retention or archiving, and these are two different topics again on their own. And they're both quite important to support the employee experience as well. And it has to do with which information is the right information, or which data should be expired, or should we not look at anymore, or which data do we need to keep and do we need to archive then? So yeah, that's but if you'd like to know more, yes, I'll take that as a suggestion for a future webinar topic. But we can definitely also have a discussion.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, but based on the governance part, that was something that came up in my mind.
Kat talked about, and her governance example was about the rollout of Teams with the proper templating, so that the templates actually make sense to people and they actually connect to their daily work and the business processes that you have in place in an organization. But part of that process is again also offboarding. So it's not just for an employee, the offboarding is important, but it's for information, for data, it's important as well, and also for a team. And I think that's also where a tool like Orchestry or AvePoint, or there's other tools out there, but these are the two that we work with the most. They have that life cycle experience in place as well, so they can definitely help you with offboarding teams or archiving teams as well, including content.
Looking forward to that.
Thanks.
Thank you.
If possible, a short Viva Connections demo. Sure. Let me show you. So let me just, good thing I prepared some demos earlier. Let me just make sure they're both working before I get that going. So I'm going to show you two different ones because I first want to show you the rapid circle one, but we're still in the process of creating our card. So I'm going to show you something else for the cards. I'll show you some demo ones. So this is my actual team site, my team environment that I work in every day. You can see I'm actually in the new teams because we're working with Copilot now, so we have to. You can see here, so down the left-hand side here, you see I have all my different things. So I have Viva Engage, Viva Learning, Viva Insights, all these different things. But then what our organization have done is at the very top, you can see it just says RC Intranet. And this is our logo. So a lot of people in our organization might not know that this is Viva Connection, but it is. So the way it works is that I click in here. And Microsoft are updating this experience that you first get into, but you get into a bit of a Viva part. So you'll have some announcements up here, and what very soon will come in is your top news stories will also sit there. So that's coming really soon. But then you have your different cards that I'll show you in a second, and some different navigations to your intranet page. But then if you click global, you actually get into your intranet. So you'll see this looks very familiar. This is SharePoint Online. So these are our top news stories that are there. So from our recent trip to India, there's some information, different things that are going on. You can see we can connect into Viva Engage. We can add things like, you see how we had 3 different countries and we can add all kinds of cool stuff. And then you can also audience target this as well for this. So you can, for this is, I'm in Australia, so this is what I see. And I'll come up first and then Netherlands as well. And there's different things we can see here. The connection cards is this. So again, we're just working through, because you can also audience target these. So we're just working through, because in the 3 countries, we have different tools that we use. So we're in the process of working through creating these so they work for everyone. But this is an example of what it can be. So there's a scale of these cards all the way from out of the box, really simple to do, all the way to a lot of code. So this is an example of it being connected into our expense system. So what it does, it not only takes me to the expense system, but actually allows me to do what I need to do straight from here. So if this was an actual one, I could actually just approve or reject the expense straight from in here. And if you translate that into what it looks like on the phone, this is one of the first things that come up for me. So I'll have a little expense and I can actually go in and do it straight from there without having to navigate off into a different system and do different things. So that's what it can look like. I'll just see if my other demo works and I can go in here. So this is the Microsoft demo environment. They might have some different cards I can show you. So you can see other things like time off. You can connect into your HR systems. You can connect into holiday, like different things. You can connect into your pay slips. If you have a lot of frontline workers, you can connect into shifts and things like that. So you can do all kinds of different things in here. And again, this makes it really accessible, and it makes it very audience targeted. So it feels specific for me. So one of the reasons that we normally might not go to the internet is that we don't really get the what's in it for me, right? So it's organization wants to communicate to me, but there's not really that much just specifically for me. So by adding in these dashboards and adding it into Teams, it makes it so much easier to just go in, see what's going on. So it's that, you get the us, which is the broader organization. And we get the we, which is maybe the Australian team, and then I get the me because I get specific cards that are made for my role and my part of the organization. So that's basically that. It is quite simple to set up, and as I said, it's already a part of your E3 or E5 licenses. So it's something we can help with if anyone wants help with that.
Yeah, and I really like how it's also very targeted to mobile users. So
yes.
All these adaptive cards really work well on your phone as well.
They do.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do.